Okay. So we learned until now about insects that inflict either venomous or just painful stings and bites. We learned about when you can get rid of them or get them out of the way at least. Now we talk about ordinary insects which are a nuisance. That's what we're going to go on to talk about for the rest of this chapter, which is just a little bit. And then we'll move on to dealing with pets and animals, domestic, at home. What do you do with them on the Shabbos? Okay, insects. Do we have a balkoire?
I can read, Rabbi.
Hi, Eleni. Welcome
Hi.
back.
Thank you. Getting there, not easily, but getting there, thank God.
Okay.
I had a bad bout of COVID in my house.
Oh, shame. Children too.
Everybody.
Everybody, huh? Okay. You know, the expression is Toras Rabin Chatzina Choma. A shared distress is half of the consolation. So anyhow, a refuah shleima kroiva for all of you.
Thank you. To all. Non-stinging insects, right, E?
Yeah.
Only the threat of significant physical pain or injury can permit trapping. Insects that are merely annoying, example, houseflies, ants, roaches, etc., or whose stings cause only mild pain and discomfort, example, fleas, and in most cases, mosquitoes, may not be trapped. Trapping is prohibited.
The principle is that the makoim tar loy godru rabonon. In the face of pain or distress, Chachomim did not impose their gezeres. Since we're dealing with a drabonon kind of trapping, because these insects are not of the type of animal normally trapped, therefore it's a drabonon kind of trapping, number one. Number two, you're not interested in the insect. You want it not to sting or bite you, or at least not to run around in your proximity. That's why you're trapping it. So it's a Melochos eino tricha legufa, again a drabon. So it's a drabonim kind of melocha done with an animal that is only non-trappable, forbidden to be trapped midrabon. So in the face of pain, Chazal did not impose their ruling that you mustn't trap such insects in such a case where you just want to get rid of them. But if there's no pain, then you go back to the normal din that is forbidden midrabona. What do we mean no pain? No pain doesn't mean you're sitting there on a cloud. It could be, it's an annoyance to have this thing running around. But it's not pain, even if it bites. So then we go back to the normal din that is forbidden midrabon. Carry on, please.
Trapping is prohibited even if the buzzing and interference of the insect disturbs one at his meal or is disruptive to his solitude. Only direct physical pain is grounds to permit trapping of any animal. Emotional discomfort is generally not sufficient a basis for permitting a melocha. This concept applies to other melochas as well. Example, extinguishing a fire is not permitted unless there is a threat to human life. Hence, there are situations where one is halachically required to stand by and watch passively as all of his possessions become destroyed by fire before pouring a drop of water onto the flames, even though this experience is emotionally painful. Yet, because there is no direct physical pain felt by the individual, he is required to summon his courage and calm his emotions with bitachon in Hashem. The difficulty of this challenge does not permit a compromise even with a rabbinic prohibition. In this case, dousing the flames is not a melocha midoraisa, see section 2, chapter 2. It should be pointed out that nowadays house fires are considered pikuach nefesh and may be put out. See mechabe. Note, if one is...
It's not pikuach nefesh for people in the house, because everybody got out, it's pikuach nefesh because the people in the area, we live in the towns, cities, and you have neighbors. So it could be pikuach nefesh for others as well. So therefore, today, you can generally call the fire department if chas v'sholem, a house catches fire on Shabbos because of the pikuach nefesh element. Note, carry on.
If one is experiencing severe emotional stress, there may be grounds for halachic leniencies in some circumstances. A Rav should be consulted. Catching any harmless insect is prohibited, even if the intention is to release it immediately after removing it from the room, because the Melocha of Tzod occurs the moment the creature is totally confined, regardless of later intentions.
There is a way of doing it which would not involve Tzod, which is to leave open an escape route for the insect. So you haven't properly trapped it. It's also not as effective, but at least you can get rid of the insect. One thing he does not bring up is where an insect buzzing doesn't allow you to sleep. Now, where you're unable to sleep, that is a physical distress, which would allow you to get rid of that mosquito. But as I said to you last week, if you have a fan, that's a better way of getting rid of the mosquito. Chapter 3, in the Melocha of Tzod. This is a variety of Melochos. What they all have in common is that they apply to animals that you have at home. So we'll go straight in.
Halachos regarding animals and pets on Shabbos. Caring for pets and animals on Shabbos. Owning pets and animals presents special halachic problems on Shabbos. Individuals who, for one reason or other, must keep pets should be aware of these shilas and how to avoid them. Note, owning or keeping certain animals is halachically questionable, particularly vicious or dangerous animals. A Rav should be consulted on this matter. A, walking a dog.
In fact, just a minute, as the Gemara puts it, only if you live on the border can you keep a dog which can bite. Otherwise, if you live in a populated area, so Chachomim frowned on it, because especially because if a woman comes in and she's expecting and the dog barks, it can be harmful for the fetus, for the baby. So one shouldn't keep it out, or at least should keep it out of the way if you have one at home, so that it's not there. Don't assume that whoever walks in is also used to having dogs jump or bark at them. Okay, that's, by the way, nothing to do with Shabbos. Back to Shabbos. Now we're going to deal with the Melocha of Hoitzor, carrying, and even before carrying, you get to handling the animal, which is an issue of muktzah. Remember, muktzah means something which you cannot do anything with on Shabbos or Yom Tov. Yom Tov is simpler because you're allowed to shecht on Yom Tov. So an animal which is shechtable is not muktzah on Yom Tov, but on Shabbos you cannot shecht. And therefore, ordinarily, you can't do anything with the animal. So it becomes muktzah. And in muktzah, it's one of the worst kinds of muktzah. It has no use for you on Shabbos. Okay, back to walking a dog.
House pets are muktzah just as are all animals, and may therefore not be carried or handled. However, one is permitted and required to feed his pet on Shabbos. If necessary, one may walk his dog or cat on Shabbos, even with a leash. Holding the leash is not hotzoah, because the leash is an accessory required for the animal's well-being, i.e. to prevent it from becoming lost and hurt. In this context,
Let me stop you. There are two issues involved. One is the person carrying and thereby transgressing the Melocha of Hotzoah. The other one is the animal carrying. So whatever one may not do oneself, whatever one may not carry oneself, one may not put onto the animal to carry for him, or b'chlal, to put on the animal, because the animal is also supposed to rest on Shabbos. So we don't load animals on Shabbos. What is considered a load and what is considered wearing? So it's just like the person himself, you're not considered as carrying your clothes when you wear them, because they are there to assist you. They're there for your well-being or for your comfort or for your protection. If they're not necessary for any one of these three purposes, they're not there to keep you covered. They're not there for your fashion, tastes. And they're not there to protect you like an extra raincoat, which if it's a plastic, what's it called? No, what do they call that? Wraparound. If it's not a fashion item and it's not there to keep you dressed, you're already dressed. In fact, it's usually ugly. So the reason you're wearing it is to protect you from the rain. That's fine. All these three cases are legitimate uses of clothing. So they're mutar on Shabbos. They are incidental to the person wearing them. They are thoughtful, they're secondary to the person wearing them. So they're not considered that the person is carrying them, they are part of him. They become an accessory to the person. The same is true of a dog, for example, wearing a little coat because usually the owner is cold. At any rate, it's meant to protect the dog from the cold or from the wet or whatever it is, or even if it's something fashionable and the owner is proud of it, and the dog looks better or feels better, whatever, with it, then it's secondary and thoughtful to the animal. But if it's not necessary for the animal itself, it's only necessary for the owner, then as far as the animal is concerned, it's carrying the item. So the owner, is forbidden to make his animal carry on Shabbos. By the way, I said a line before that if it's a fashion item which the owner is proud of, that's not good enough. That doesn't benefit the animal. Only if the dog, for example, itself is benefiting from the item, then it's considered secondary to the dog. So it's got to be either functional or fashionable. The leash is functional. Why? Because without a leash, it could run off and get hurt. So it ends up being for the animal's benefit. Although the animal's training against the leash, it doesn't want you to have it on a leash. But ultimately, it's for the benefit of the animal, and therefore it's an accessory and it's secondary, incidental to the animal. So it's okay. What about the owner carrying the leash?
In this context, it is comparable to a garment being worn by the animal. Thus, holding the leash is similar to grabbing a person's shirt, which in turn is like holding that person's hand. Is that okay?
Yeah.
However, there are some conditions that must be complied with. 1, if walking in a Rishus Harabim, the leash must not drag on the ground or even sag within a tefach, 3.5 to 4 inches of the ground. One must therefore not allow too much slack on the leash.
Here we're talking about the problem of the owner carrying the leash. For the dog, it's a protection. But for the owner, it would be carrying unless it were tightly attached to the dog's collar, in which case it's not on the ground and it's not considered being carried. Now, if it is so close to the ground that it's already considered as being on the ground, then it doesn't help if it's attached to the dog. You're still considered carrying it. So you're not allowed to have it drag on the ground or just near the ground, which is halachically considered on the ground. Okay, carry on.
2. When holding the leash in a Rishus HaRabim, the free end must not protrude from one's hand to the extent of a tefach.
Okay.
One must not lift the animal in any way, and the dog must not be rebellious to the extent that the owner must struggle with it to keep it from pulling away and escaping.
Okay, because then he's trapping it. Carry on.
Closing the door on a new or unruly pet. As explained earlier, a new or borrowed pet that is unaccustomed to its surroundings is not considered domesticated with regard to its new owner. This can present a problem when the owner or anyone else wishes to enter or leave the house, and the animal dashes to the door to escape before the door is closed. Closing the door would then raise serious halachic questions, because doing so simultaneously confines and traps the animal indoors. Even if the animal does not actually run for the door, but would if it were aware that it was opened, then there is a halachic problem with closing the door. Oi.
Eleni, are you okay to read?
I'm
Sound
okay.
like you're not. Yeah?
I'm okay, thank you.
All right.
So any amount of straining the dog behind your feet and trying to keep it away from exiting is considered trapping?
Well, if you close the door. If you close the door, we're going to see if you physically block the animal a little bit later.
Okay, closing the door of a large house. If the animal is not near the door. If the house is large or has many rooms, one may enter or leave and close the door behind him because a pet bird, dog, or cat are not considered tightly confined in a large house, since one would need to chase it around the house to retrieve it. And closing the door would only be a rabbinic level of tzod. The rabbinic level of tzod is permitted in circumstances such as this, where one's reason for closing the door upon leaving is to protect the house from burglary or from the elements, not to confine the animal. However, this lenient ruling should only be applied when the animal is not aware that the door is being opened. If the animal is attempting to escape through the door, this is no firm basis for permitting one to close the door when entering or leaving the house. If the animal notices the opening and attempts to flee, closing the door in that case would be a forbidden act of tzod, at least midarabanan. However, if the house is very large or has many rooms, one may confine the animal to a section of the house in an area large enough for the animal to elude capture. As explained earlier, reducing and closing off part of the area of an animal reducing and closing off part of, there's a typing mistake there. The area of an animal's loose confinement is not forbidden if it still remains loosely confined. A long-term solution is to design the entrance of the house with a small foyer containing 2 doors. Entering would then be permitted if one is careful
not like a door.
to close the outer door before opening the inner door. Closing the door of a small apartment or room. However, if one lives in a very small apartment, closing the door on a newly acquired pet, dog or cat could be forbidden. Similarly, closing the door to an individual room, even in a very large house, and thereby confining the pet to that room would also be forbidden. In all these cases, the confinement is very narrow and would be considered tzod midoraisa, which is forbidden regardless of one's intentions. Permissible methods of opening and closing the door in all cases. Although closing the door on an animal in a small area is an act of tzod midoraisa, it is nevertheless possible to enter or exit a small room or apartment with the pet left remaining inside in a permissible manner. The proper procedure is as follows. One should open the door only a crack at a time, while simultaneously covering the opening with his body. This will preclude any opening large enough for the animal to escape, even for a moment. In this manner, no avenue of escape will have ever been opened to the animal. Therefore, opening and closing the door in this manner is permissible. Similarly, a farmer who must enter a chicken coop should open and close the gate slowly, rotating his body around the door opening while covering the opening with his body at the same time.
So the point is not that he's doing it with his body. The point is that there was never a possibility for the animal to escape at any moment. So when he then closes the door, it's not like trapping the animal. The animal is as it was. Okay, pet fish.
As with other house pets, fish in a bowl may be fed on Shabbos. However, the water may not be changed on Shabbos because this requires some additional exertion of a non-Shabbos nature, which is considered a detraction of the honor of Shabbos. Fresh water may be added to the existing water because this does not require significant effort. The fish bowl is not muktzah in this context. If a fish jumped from its tank, if a rare or expensive pet fish jumped out of its fish bowl or tank, one may return the fish to the bowl, even though it will be necessary to handle the fish, which is muktzah. This ruling is based upon a combination of principles allowing that in some cases, the considerations of tsar ba'alei chaim, animal suffering, and a financial loss take precedence over the restriction of muktzah. Because the fish will suffer and die if not replaced in the water, the restriction of muktzah is waived. The Meloch of Tzod, however, is not a halachic issue here because the detached fish is considered pre-confined. Moving a fish tank. There is no basis to prohibit moving or handling a fish tank on Shabbos because the fish tank assumes the same status of muktzah as the fish it contains. However, some poskim regard a small aquarium as a non-muktzah decor, similar to a bouquet of flowers. Therefore, if it poses a danger where it is, or another urgent need arises, the fish tank may be moved. An aquarium with electric components may not be moved if the power supply might be affected. Use of animals on Shabbos. Riding on animals. One is not permitted to ride an animal, lean against an animal, place objects, example, a saddle on the animal, or remove them from an animal on Shabbos. Sikotzer. Seeing eye dog.
1 second. Do you realize why he says sikotzer? Koitzer is cutting off
cut the hairs
from where it is growing. Our concern with riding a horse is that you might what's it called? You might detach a branch in order to guide the horse. That's it's a gzeira because of koitzer. So even if you're riding in an area which is the reshus hayochid, there wouldn't be a prohibition of the animal making the animal carry, but there's still a problem of the gzeira lest you detach a branch. Seeing eye dog.
A seeing eye dog is a highly trained and completely tamed animal. Therefore, confining this type of dog prevents no question of tzod on Shabbos. However, there is a serious question of hotzoah, carrying, when walking with the dog in Rosh Hashanah, where there is no Eruv. The question here is specifically with the harness that the owner grasps while walking with the dog. This harness is not a protective accessory to the dog, but is primarily a device meant completely for the benefit of the owner, unlike a leash. Thus, both the dog and the owner are carrying the harness in Rosh Hashanah. Some poskim permit use of a seeing eye dog, even in Rishus HaRabim. A Rav must be consulted in these cases. Where there is a proper Erev, walking the dog is of course permitted. One who is blind may walk into shul with his seeing eye dog. However, he should preferably be seated at the rear of the shul, near a rear exit, so as not to disrupt the davening. Feeding animals, feeding pets. One is pets and animals, and those in here, all those in care. One may not eat before feeding his animals. However, drinking is permitted.
You know, we learned
Wild
that
animals.
from we say in Shema that Hashem will, if we listen to his mitzvahs, I said Hashem will grant the rain in its proper season, and I will grant vegetation for your animals, in your field for your animals, the ochalta v'stavota, and you will eat and be sated. So first, Hashem says, I'll provide food for your animal, then you will eat and be sated, from which we learn that you're not allowed to sit down to a meal until you feed the animals that are dependent on you. So that's the mitzvah. Carry on, please.
Wild animals and birds may not be fed on Shabbos. They are also muktzah and may not be handled on Shabbos. However, a stray dog is an exception and may be fed. Feeding a pet bird in the cage. A pet bird that is not completely domesticated and is not used to its surroundings must be treated as a wild bird for halachic purposes, i.e. relating to Tzod. Therefore, one should not open the cage door when feeding the bird on Shabbos, because once the door has been opened, the bird is no longer confined. Closing the door afterwards is equivalent to confining the bird and is consequently the Melochos of Tzod. The bird should be fed in one of two ways. One, bird feed should be passed through the wire mesh of the cage without opening the cage door. Two, if the cage door must be opened, one should open it only slightly, allowing an opening that is too narrow for the bird to escape through. If the door must be opened wide, then one must keep the opening covered with his hand or some other item so as to prevent any escape route from ever being formed. Feeding farm chickens in their coop. Farmers or others who raise chickens must be mindful of questions of tzod when opening the door to the chicken coop. When feeding the chickens, the door to the coop must not be opened if the opening will be wide enough for any chicken to slip through. One should throw the seed through the wire mesh if this is possible. If the farmer must enter the coop, he may do so by opening and closing the gate slowly while rotating his body around the door opening. In this way, the opening will remain continuously obstructed with his body during his entry and exit. As a long-term solution, one may also design the building with a hallway containing two doors. Entering would then be permitted if one is careful to close the outer door before opening the inner door.
All right. I don't know how many people get to see squirrels or raccoons around.
Squirrels and wild birds that can pose a threat.
You're fading out, Eleni. I'm not sure whether it's on your end. You disappeared, Eleni.
Yeah, everyone else is clear, Rabbi. Your sound is clear on my side.
Yeah, but is everyone hearing Eleni?
No, not me.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
That's better. Yes. Good.
Okay. I didn't hear what you said, Rabbi.
Said we don't hear you.
Okay. Where should I
from
read?
A.
A.
Start from A.
Where there is a threat of rabies. Animals that can pose a threat of pain or injury, such as rats, raccoons, and the like, may be trapped on Shabbos if necessary. This is especially true in areas where the spread of rabies or other diseases by animals is prevalent. Examples: if a raccoon or squirrel got into the house, the door to that room, if not very small or narrow, may be closed to seal it off. However, a non-Jew should preferably be asked to do so. Similarly, a large chest or wooden box may be inverted over a rat to keep it contained, but a crack should be left open for air if the rodent is to remain securely confined as such. Trapping a raccoon in the vicinity. If a raccoon is merely in one's vicinity, one should not trap or kill it, even when suspecting that it may possibly have rabies. However, one must tell a non-Jew to telephone the authorities. If one knows that the raccoon is rabid, he may kill it if necessary. Example.
We're going to go into a pretty complicated discussion of what the habits of a raccoon are. Okay, just for the fun of it, carry on.
The raccoon is a nocturnal animal, active at night, sleeping by day. If one sees a raccoon during the day, he should suspect that it may be disoriented because it is afflicted with rabies and is therefore dangerous. However, killing a raccoon is not a simple matter and should certainly not be attempted by the average person. Merely striking the animal with a heavy object will not kill or disable it, for they are very tough, solidly built creatures and difficult to kill even with a gun. They are also brave fighters and therefore dangerous. For all practical purposes, it will probably be necessary to call a professional exterminator or the police to eliminate the raccoon. If it is in the advanced stages of the rabies disease, it will act lethargic, walking slowly and weakly instead of moving swiftly and powerfully, as healthy raccoons will. In such cases, if one feels that he can do so safely, he may place a heavy crate or chest over the sick raccoon to prevent it from causing any harm. He should then contact the authorities to remove the dangerous animal.
Okay.
Capturing
Let's
an animal.
Let's stop here and take questions. Maybe you're preparing for Purim already, and you have questions related to Purim, or otherwise Shabbos questions, anything at all.
Can I just ask about this raccoon? If you suspect that he's not well, you'll cover him with the box. Does that mean that you cover him with the box till the end of Shabbos and then call the authorities, or can you call the authorities on Shabbos?
You can have a goy call the authorities.
But not yourself.
If it's definitely rabid and it's dangerous, then you would be, no, even then, dangerous, then you would be allowed to call the authorities yourself, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Raz?
Rabbi, sorry, I just have to clear my thoughts on this. You have a dog, a child comes into the house, the child is terrified of the dog. You then want to put the dog somewhere away so that the child can feel comfortable in your home. So you put it in a room, but you do have to close the door. Can it be put into like a playroom and the door shut? It's enough space for the dog to run around, but it will not bother the child.
Okay, you're talking about a dog that belongs to you.
Yes, my own pet dog.
It's already accustomed to being in your house.
Yes.
Such a dog is already considered as trapped before you start. So putting it in a room is not a problem.
Yes.
When we learned before that confining it in a room where you wouldn't have to run after it to catch it, confining it in such a room is considered Tzod, is in the case of an animal that's not yours. Instead, if you borrowed or you just bought the dog, then it's not considered confined in your house, it's looking to run away. That's when it's a problem. But if the dog belongs to you in the case that you said, not an issue.
Thank
No
you,
problem.
Rabbi. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you.
Rabbi, is there anything to be concerned about if our kids are scared of dogs and we have a few friends that have dogs, so then I ask them if they can put the dog somewhere else. Is there anything for me to be concerned about or mention that could be problematic if it's their dog and they...
If it's their dog, no issues.
Yeah.
Not a
No
problem.
issues, okay. And Rabbi, can I ask you, I'm just so confused about smearing on Shabbos. When can you spread something on a bread, on challah, and when can you not? Like if you're making a sandwich, you want to put mayonnaise and tomato sauce.
Mayonnaise
Cottage
is
cheese.
not a problem because you're not breaking anything down when you put it on the bread. You're just applying it to the bread. If you're smearing avocado, then you are simultaneously grinding it and smearing it. That's the problem, not the smearing, but the effectively grinding the avocado down. So that is an issue, and you may not do that unless you have prepared the avocado before, or unless you're just putting it on the bread, cutting it off and putting it on the bread, and then you squash it with the bread itself and eat it as a sandwich.
Okay, so
But then-
anything processed basically isn't going to be a problem.
If it's already processed, it won't be a problem.
Like hummus.
Okay.
The thing is, there's a meloch of memareach, taking a solid and breaking it down, which is the reason why we don't use a bar of soap on Shabbos, because you're rubbing it down from a solid, you're smearing it. So anything which is originally a solid, let's say it's not food, but you wouldn't be making a sandwich out of it. But it's another issue, like smearing it on the body, if it's a paste or if it's a cream, then smearing it on the body would be an issue of mimareach. Putting it on your food would not, because if it's not a solid to begin with, and you're not turning it into a liquid spreadable substance, that's why I said mayonnaise, already prepared avocado, or other such things, butter, it wouldn't be an issue.
Okay, and
hummus,
cottage
Rabbi?
cheese?
Sorry?
You first, Anne. Is that Anne?
Delaney.
Is-
And
is
hummus, Rabbi, it's already been ground down.
What?
Hummus?
Hummus, yeah, not a problem.
Yeah.
And cottage cheese? Has that been ground down?
Same thing.
Okay, thank you, Rabbi.
You're having a lot of sandwiches on Shabbos with milk and stuff.
It's a nice breakfast.
Where
and
is
it's a
the
nice
cholent and where is the...
supper. This is breakfast and supper. Cholent for lunch.
Okay.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Anything else? Raz? Okay.
Sylvia, do you actually have a Zoom number and code to get into the site?
I do.
Please, will you send it?
I'll put it on the group for you.
Thank
Okay.
you, dear.
Sure. It's the same every week.
Thanks, Rabbi. Sorry I was late, Rabbi.
Okay, so that's it. Nobody has questions. This is already Purim, where we have no longer any questions. Amalek is topic. And having gotten rid of Amalek, we got rid of all our doubts. So wonderful. I'll see you next week in Mitzvah Hashem. If you have any Purim related questions, please prepare them. And thereafter, for the few weeks after that, which we have until we break up for Pesach, I'll take questions on Pesach-related issues. Have a good week. Take care.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you,
Rabbi.
Rabbi. And thanks, Severe, for recording and everything.
Okay, thank you. It's a privilege. Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Tzibir.